Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Yanina Dore, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine friends, and welcome back to the podcast, where today we are heading to Oregon, where we're going to explore how cross-state AVAs actually work and whether state lines really matter when it comes to wine style. We're going to take a closer look at the Rocks District of Milton Freewater. This is a tiny, fascinating AVA with some of the most distinctive soils in the Pacific Northwest. And we are going to be diving into Oregon Pinot Gris and comparing it with those from Alsace and northern Italy. My guest today is Samantha Cole-Johnson. She is the senior US editor for JansisRobinson.com. She's worked harvests across both hemispheres, teaches WSET Level 3 and Diploma, and has been recognised for her wine writing and communication, including an award for her top score on the Stage 1 Master of Wine exam. She's also the creator of the Mission Blind Tasting Series, and also for the earlier part of this year has brought us the weekly wine news in 5. And make sure you stay to the end, because I will be asking Sam, with all of this wine news in 5, what does she think has been some of the most important developments that will actually shape the future of wine, and some fantastic wine recommendations from someone who is constantly tasting and thinking about wine. So pour yourself a glass, settle in, and enjoy the episode. Sam, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome. Welcome into the wine chair.
I'm so excited to be here.
Yay! To be honest, everybody listening, you have no idea how much we've been speaking already. Almost an hour just chatting wine talk. But we're getting serious now, aren't we?
Oh yeah, we're gonna actually stick to what we were supposed to talk about instead of everything else.
Well, I don't know. I think it was still very wine themed, but we are going to talk about you and your wine journey and some of the wine regions that you love to discuss. So, I mean, you have worked in cellars, you have studied formally, you're doing your Master of Wine, you report on wine globally. So the fact that you've covered it all, let me ask you as we start this podcast, how has that combination shaped the way that you actually taste and you think about wine today?
Ooh, okay, so
deep question, right?
I think it's a blessing and a curse to have your entry into wine be kind of classical and academic focused. So going through the WSET or going through the Court of Master Sommeliers, the CMS, because I find that people who watch people taste or are very intrigued by this process from a consumer standpoint are like, oh man, how do you do that? How do you give a tasting note? And you're like, well, there's this thing called the SAT, which is the standardized approach to tasting. And they give you all these descriptors and they are like, okay, so now you evaluate the sweetness, the tannin, the acid, the alcohol, the body, and then we have these fruit descriptors for you. But the curse of that is that if you do that early on, you kind of box yourself in for a while. And you have to reach for new descriptors that might not be shared language, because you've also been indoctrinated into this cult of shared language where if I say blackcurrant, you know what I mean, because we're speaking from this grid that we all understand. Except the world doesn't understand this grid. So we actually don't have a shared language with everyone. We just have a shared language amongst ourselves.
Yep.
So you have to reach beyond that and broaden your scope if you are then wanting to speak to more people.
Absolutely.
So blessing and a curse, how this affects how you write about things.
Well, let us see now how you talk about the wines as we go on this episode. Now, I asked you, what wine regions do you love to talk about? Now, you said Washington, Oregon, California. I said you weren't allowed to really do Washington. We've just done a Washington episode. So
I've good because I've spent way more time. I live in Oregon and I've spent way more time in California than I have in Washington, truth be told.
Okay, good. Well, I think, so I want to touch on Oregon to start with. And I actually thought, considering I have recently done a Washington episode, everyone go to the show notes so you can see the link to it if you've missed it. I want to talk about these cross-border AVAs, because some of the AVAs, some of the wine regions are straddled across both Washington and Oregon. And as just a wine lover, or even someone myself living in London, I'm like, do you think that state lines actually matter at all in the shaping of the wine style? Should we completely ignore them? Should we just focus on the AVA and the individual site itself? Like, what do we do?
Okay, so I think that state lines matter pretty much not at all, except
simple
in the legal part of it, which we can get into in a second. But I would also say that AVA really doesn't matter as much as people think it does. In many cases, it's much more for the benefit of marketing, not in an icky way where we're trying to sell you on a specific thing, but more in a way where producers need to band together in order to bring their wines to a market. One producer probably can't afford to take their wines to Indiana and show them to a bunch of people. But if you get everybody paying into a collective pool, and then someone from that organization going to show a bunch of wines in Indiana, in New York, in Kentucky, wherever you are in this country, that's much more feasible. So something like the Columbia Gorge, for instance, which is a AVA that straddles Oregon and Washington, and it runs from west to east. And for every mile east you go, there's an inch less rainfall, which means it is an entirely different growing environment on the west end of the AVA than it is on the east end. It also gets way hotter on the east end because you have a lot of influence coming in from, it's right around Hood River where it's starting. And so you have so much cooling influence there. And then as you go further east, it gets warmer and warmer. So when you think about what's planted there, they also don't have a signature grape variety. So there's so many different things planted, and it's really dependent on what the rainfall is in that specific area or what the growing degree days are for that specific area. So you can't necessarily tell if something's grown in Columbia Gorge. That's not super feasible, but it's super important to have that AVA because people can band together and take their wines to market and tell people about how incredible the Columbia Gorge is because it's a beautiful place to visit. They make gorgeous wines, and it would be a shame if the world didn't know about it.
By the way, you've just said how beautiful it is. How far is this from Portland?
Oh, you can get there in an hour and 15.
Okay. That is very useful to know because would be a very good starting point, Portland, and lovely that you can then go on a day trip.
And if you love windsurfing, it's a good place to go. Some of the best windsurfing in the whole country. So you could go take a windsurfing lesson, drink some wine, maybe go to a brewery, go on a bike ride. Also great bike trails up there.
There you go, everyone. Make notes. Make notes. But defining it as a wine region, no. But that's actually really, really valid. What do you think? Okay, I'm going to take you across, going further east to Walla Walla, which straddles Washington and Oregon. But in the Oregon side is the Rocks District. So I feel like, is this something where we could actually say, hang on, like this is an AVA that actually has been defined by its soil type? This is specifically very unique, that area.
Absolutely. you absolutely can say the Rocks District. And the Rocks District is small. That's a pretty tight little AVA. The soil is consistent more than, I think, any other U.S. AVA. The soil of the Rocks District is consistent. You have more or less, they look like the stones in Chateauneuf. But there's also this history of farming that was not at all related to vines in that area. And I discovered this in researching a piece a few years ago. There was a lot of like fertilizer salts that were left from that. And it might be part of the reason you get this super distinctive, salty, like savory flavor in Rocks District wines. That area has been farmed for a while. And I think that is maybe a little bit of a part of it. The acid, if you look at pH, the pH is super high, so there are low acids, but it feels like there's more acid than there is, and your mouth is watering with this saltiness. It's like almost like a pork rub and like savory rosemary character.
I love the way you're describing that. I mean, it definitely from what I've never had a wine from here. Obviously, it's a really small region. Everybody, I guess the main grape is Syrah, although there's other Rhone varieties growing there. Cabernet Sauvignon is growing there. Is there any other grape varieties other than the Rhone varieties and Cabernet Franc? I suppose Bordeaux varieties as
Bordeaux
well.
varieties, Rhone varieties. There's a big emphasis on Rocks District Syrah, but I would say that a lot of producers in that area right now are more excited about Grenache, actually. Because if you think about the Rhone, or you think about, Washington, in terms of climate, Syrah actually isn't the best performing grape variety in super hot areas. And Eastern Washington is pretty warm. So, and you have these big stones that are collecting heat, and there's so much heat in that region. And yeah, you can ripen pretty much anything you want to. But in terms of what's performing really well, Grenache is doing really great because it loves heat so much. So there's a lot of super compelling Grenache. Yes, the Syrah is really compelling as well, but you should try the Grenache if you have.
Okay. I am so happy you're saying Grenache, because I'm just realizing that the Grenache as a grape variety is my kind of grape, and the fact that it can be people, really rounded and, big fruity with a little spiciness, but also it can be so incredibly elegant, growing at altitude, and it's so versatile. And I actually just like the medium bodied, pure fruited expressions where they're not using any oak. And I just think Grenache is really great as a variety for that. So I love the fact that you're saying that.
It's not quite as fruity. It is more of that salty savory.
Yeah, so I've heard this savory ferrous style. So again, I don't know, irony,
salty, bloody. Yeah, it's pretty divisive.
What sounds okay. This is unique. Although, okay, and you touched on the fact that this place has a lot of sun. There is desert influence here. This is a continental climate, but really desertic as well. So lots of heat, unique. You've got it's basalt cobblestones, isn't it? So it's really, really a region to be identified. But a lot of producers, not that there's that many, they're not labeling the Rocks District they're just often labeling this as Walla Walla, right?
So this is where the part with state lines does matter a bit in the legal component, because you have Walla Walla, and Walla Walla is a cross-border AVA. It's half Washington, half Oregon. Actually, it's probably more Washington than it is Oregon. And it is Washington producers who are making wine, for the most part, in the Rocks District of Milton Freewater. But the Rocks District is entirely within Oregon. It is so close to Washington. And if you think about where the majority of Oregon's winemaking is, that's in Willamette Valley. But the way the law is written, you have to make your wine, if you want to label with the Rocks District, you need to make that wine in the state of Oregon. Well, if you're a Washington producer, your winery is on the Washington side of that border. So as soon as you bring those grapes across the border, you have to label as Walla Walla because it's cross-border AVA. And that means that if you truck grapes all the way to the Willamette Valley, you're going, it's probably, okay, so 4 hours to Portland and then another hour and a half down to Willamette Valley, or hour down, more or less 5 hours away. You're trucking 5 hours to get to a winery, make the wine there, and you can label Rocks District. But if you drive 10 minutes across the border into Washington and make the wine right there, you cannot label without AVA.
Which, no, but it does make sense, but it's annoying. So
it's so annoying. And it's also, I think that probably the most famous Rocks District producer is Christophe Baron, who has Cayuse.
Yes.
And he doesn't label as the Rocks District. He could. His winery is there. He says it's because he hates the name of the AVA when I've talked to him before. He says it's not rocks. It's stones. It's stones. What a terrible word, rocks. That's gross. It's stones. But I harbor this suspicion that it's a little bit because he's a team player as much as he is a huge personality. And I don't think he would necessarily love being categorized as a team player. But he is a bit of a team player, and he does want to represent his area and the people who are near him. And those are the people he sees every day. That's the community he lives in. And the fact that they're not allowed to label with that AVA it grates on people. So he's not going to take advantage of something that other people can't take advantage of. His wines are great. They sell themselves. He doesn't need to.
Yeah, and these are super premium. This is a producer that I know for sure is in the UK. Hedonism, everybody, the sweetest store for wine lovers in central London. They have many of his, actually, I know Syrahs. I'll have to look at, I'm assuming he's doing Grenache as well. But we're talking like 150, 200, 300 pounds a bottle I've seen in Hedonism.
And then he also has the horsepower wines and the no girls wines. So
what are they? Sorry. Ooh,
they're offshoot. The winemaking is very similar for all of them. They're very close together. He's sourcing from different vineyards.
Okay. Are those wines more affordable?
No.
Are they? Okay. Okay, moving on. Is there any producers that you know off the top of your head? And I do appreciate I'm now, prompting you without any notice, that are making wines in the Rocks District that are kind of affordable?
I would say that the closest in profile to Cayuse would be something like Rheinvan. Okay. And Christophe Baron mentored, I'm forgetting the producer's name right now, but he had a mentoring relationship. So Rheinvan is a similar profile, and the wines are not cheap, but they are cheaper.
Okay, good, cheaper. We like cheaper. I am going to find out who that producer is, everyone, and I'm going to put it in the show notes for you all so we can discover it together. So I think that is still a really cool AVA. It's good to know, even if people are not going to find it on the labels. Things might change. I mean, I know they're collaborating, they're pushing to have some status, I guess.
To put a little bit of a plug in for myself here, if you are looking for wines from the Rocks District, we have an article called How the Rocks Rock on jancesrobinson.com, and it has a bunch of producers that you should check out in it. And I will say, if you see something labeled as Walla Walla as the entire AVA, the larger AVA, it's not the same as the Rocks District. So you can't assume that anything was made in the Rocks if it's labeled Walla Walla, but you should look up the producer and see where they are, and if they'll tell you which vineyard they're getting fruit from, because they might be sourcing from the Rocks District. So, you can, if it says Walla Walla, maybe do some investigating into where where it's coming from.
Listen, if you're a wine lover, you're supposed to go down the rabbit hole anyway. So why not? That's what Google's for, you know? We're not supposed to know everything. Just do a few little key searches and see what comes up. So, okay. So we talked about Walla Walla and within it, the Rocks District. And that's very much on the east. You've really made a very clear point here about not stressing out about the AVAs, but understanding that as we keep on moving east, it's getting drier and drier and more desert-like. But Willamette Valley in the west is lush and green, isn't it? So that's how, and I don't know, what's the percentage of wines in Oregon coming from the Willamette Valley now, more or less? Or just guess. What do we think?
I'm going to end up guessing.
Give me a number. Throw one out. Hope for the best.
I think it's probably somewhere between 65 and 70%, but I could be entirely wrong about that.
Well, this is...
It's the majority of Oregon's winemaking, but it is not everything. There's a lot of wine being grown in Southern Oregon, and there's wine being grown up in the Rocks District, and there's wine being grown in the Columbia Gorge, and all of these places exist and should be acknowledged.
And oh my God, should we mention Snake River Valley? Where
we should. I've never been there, so it's hard for me to make a plug for it because I don't have experience. But yes, we should also drink wines from there. I've never seen one. I need to go.
You've never seen? Okay, but guys, everybody, let's all try and find a Snake River Valley wine. But to be honest, the majority is Idaho, isn't it? And then that is now, again, another...
and the thing is a lot of those wines are... Okay, so a couple things. Some of those wines are being put into massive bulk blends. But the wineries over there that are really good, well, there's Boise, and that's a big market. And they come and they take all the good wine and then they go home. And so it's in both Washington and in Idaho, there's this thing that happens where really good wineries are mostly DTC because the Seattle market or the Boise market will just come, grab wines, join the club, and off they go. And then what you're getting in the UK, no shade, but is mostly like Chateau Ste. Michelle or these huge producers, because they have the volume to export, and the little guys don't want to deal with all the paperwork. And they're also like, well, we have a ready market. Look, these people come visit us all the time, which I think is actually a more sustainable model. But sometimes when you talk to people about Washington wine, they go, oh, well, it's like Chateau Ste. Michelle, right? That's all of it. And you're like, for a really long time, that was the huge majority of it. It's still a really big piece of it. But there are really, really good wines being made, and from smaller producers and people who are concerned about farming, and it's trending more in that direction.
So Oregon, always when I got to know a winery and then another winery, generally though, it did seem, again, and I want you to tell me if I've got the stereotype completely wrong, a lot more craftsmanship, smaller wineries. Again, a big focus on organics, being very, very green, considering there's a decent amount of rain. And there was always this sustainability focus, small winemaking focus. Is that still... Well, was it ever that way? Is that just, have I...
That is entirely accurate. Washington started with big producers and like large scale farming. And a lot of the vineyards there are still built that way. They're hundreds of acres. Oregon started, well, at least the second run after Prohibition, and there was like Hillcrest before there was Irie, but Irie is the one that most people know as that was the first vinifera in the Willamette Valley. And so David Lett was known as Papa Pinot, and it was small scale. Like he came up from California and he started planting, and the Irie's not huge. It's still little. It's still very much craftsmanship production. It's organic. It's small scale, and the winery it's not new and big and like shiny. It's old school. The wines are beautiful, but there's not this showmanship that you get in California, because in Oregon, most of the old timers, they started with not very much money. And so they built things. I was just talking to John Paul, who owns Cameron Winery. 84 was his first vintage. Cameron was established pretty early on because people weren't coming up in as big a waves as they are now. And the way he built his cellar was he had enough money to hire an excavator and a stonemason to build the walls. And then everything else they had to do themselves. So you go into the cellar there, it's like a damp Burgundian kind of feeling basement with mold all over everything. And the wines are incredible, but the cellar, it does smell damp and cellar-like.
Well,
and
this
is the old school producers. It wasn't a big showy thing. And then more recently, so I said Washington is going towards the smaller scale. Oregon is, I don't know if it's still the last growth market on the US West Coast, but for a couple of years there, we were the only growth market left on the West Coast in terms of planting because people were so excited about this small scale production and there's a real artisanal feel to it and people are super passionate about making these wines and it has gotten so that there are way more commercial interests here in the last couple of years and things are starting to be more glitzy and glamorous and people aren't necessarily doing their own farming anymore. They're hiring out to vineyard management companies. And that's not a bad thing. It's great to have specialized viticulture knowledge, but I do think that, and I shouldn't pick on Oregon here. I think that vit management companies are on the West Coast more the norm than not. And that is even more true in California and Washington than it is in Oregon. But it's hard when you have a bunch of people who are contract labor entering a vineyard to do a job and they are treated like they're just another cog and you can replace them with someone else. And it's like a vineyard would be turned into an Amazon warehouse where it's like someone from this warehouse can come do this same position because the system is the same. But the system isn't the same. So to me, that craftsmanship that we're talking about, it's not just winemaking. It's not just production being small. It is having hands on all pieces of the process. And I find that people a lot of times are like, oh, well, how come you can get a really great Chenin from the Loire or a really great Melon de Bourgogne, a Muscadet, or whatever it is, or a really great Bordeaux. How come I can get this for cheaper than I can get great California wine? Part of the problem is, one, generational ownership. So that land was paid off generations ago. And yes, there are heavy taxes on heavy inheritance taxes, but families plan for that. Here, someone will pay off land and then they'll sell it. And then that person is trying to make up for the fact that they just took on a huge debt. And then the other piece is when there are more commercial interests involved, things like, Constellation Brands, you have shareholders. So you're not just paying off your land or paying your employees, you're paying your investors. And that's true of like anything that is a commercial. It doesn't have to be publicly traded or anything. If you have shareholders, they want something back. So you have that piece. And then you just have, the bigger something gets, the more detached I think people get from the process and the more people you're paying. So all of a sudden you have a C-suite with a huge marketing department and you're paying this person for that and that person for that and that person for that. And you hired out the vineyard laborer and you hired a winemaker and then you also have a consultant winemaker. And if you look at a lot of estates in the old world, it's like, oh, well, this is our family and one brother is working vit and the sister is in charge of winemaking and she goes out and works with him in the winter and he comes in and works with her during harvest. And then they're out there doing pruning and then one of them will go do sales. Great. Okay. So the whole operation is like 2, 3, maybe mom is doing accounting. Maybe dad is the one doing visits and pouring wine. But you're employing a family who probably lives on that land, and they're paying for their lifestyle, and they have socialized health insurance. And here you've got corporate interests who want to pay out shareholders and people who are trying to pay off that land. And it's not just to derive a salary and health insurance, which is also very expensive. It's to create value where I hesitate to say it, but like maybe you're not creating extra value. Maybe a lot of those positions are not super necessary, and it's just what's necessary because you want to do volume.
Oh, do we go down this route? I mean, this is a conversation. I mean, it's actually, you've just brought something up that's quite interesting. The looking behind the scenes, the economics, taking things away from the romance of just owning a vineyard and walking through the vines. But there's so many cogs, wheels, things to think about.
And I will say that I think the romance is more there. To me, I don't want to go sit in a fancy tasting room. Fancy tasting rooms are nice, but I would much rather talk to the person who's farming and making a wine. And sometimes that means that if you come in the fall, they won't see you because they're busy. And that's a lot of times how it works in the EU. But the always wanting to have someone available to do visits means that you've hired someone who's not necessarily part of the process all the time. And so they might know less, and perhaps the experience is more glamorous, but it's not as information rich. And maybe you're trading the glitz and the glamour for like, you should probably not wear heels if you're going to one of these old school producers who you're going to follow around the vineyard. I had one visit. This was Beaufrere a couple years ago. And I got there and I've got my notebook, and I have Mike Jr. is taking me around to see the property. And someone says something to him and he goes, "Oh, okay." And he goes, "Okay, so you drive that truck behind me." It's like, what?
He said that to you.
So he's like got me in a vineyard truck, and then he's driving he's driving a tractor, and then he stops to like fill up one of the sprayers, and I'm like, this is the more you might get thrown into situations that you have no idea what you're doing.
Wow. I mean, to be fair, I went to a tiny little operation once in Rías Baixas in Spain. One guy making his wine out of his garage. But honestly, the wines are doing really well in the UK. And I was in flip-flops. Why was I in flip-flops going to a winery? I don't know. Don't shout at me or whatever. But anyway, we're walking through his garage winery, and there's like water on the floor and this and that and whatever. I'm like, yeah, fine, be careful. His dog's running around. And then he's got this little ladder going up to one of the tanks, and he's like, oh, yeah, pop your head over if you want. And I'm like, sure, why not? Climbing up and popping my head. Everything was fine. All was good. I was aware I was in flip-flops. I was very, very careful. I did check the ladder. But honestly, I'm just like, it was beautiful. It was actually very nice to see the pure chaos of a small winery. You don't get that.
That is beautiful. And I think that you can not demand that of people, but you can have that experience. Sometimes it does take buying people's wine for a couple of years before they have that time to give you because they are so busy. But that creates a sustainable relationship where you're buying maybe directly from them every year, and you get to go visit them. But that opportunity isn't available to the public because having that opportunity available to the public does mean every day, does mean extra staff. And if you're not a continuous patron of that winery, then yes, they have to charge you for that. You're not buying 3-4 cases every year. You are going in, you're buying one bottle, you're just there for the experience. And to me, I don't know, it's a weird industry we work in. You wouldn't come watch me taste wine, but we all want to go watch winemakers make wine.
But it's magic. Winemaking is magic.
It's true.
Not science.
It is.
It's magic. It's magic and art. And So just coming back to Oregon in general, would you still say that the majority are these, just to confirm, because I know things are changing. And as you said, you've kind of gone back and forth, kind of explaining kind of the pros and the cons of what you get. But Oregon as a whole, there are more of the small wineries that may not be open, but if you can get them, how amazing is that kind of?
I have two answers.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes, there are more wineries that are small than there are large. In terms of the volume production and the percentage that is made by small wineries versus big wineries, I do think we are starting to get to the point where I don't actually know where the percentage falls on how much of Oregon wine is produced by large-scale wineries versus small-scale wineries. 10 years ago, I would have been like, oh yeah, no, the majority of production is being produced by small-scale wineries. Now I'm like, there are way more small-scale wineries than large-scale, but the large-scale are getting bigger.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Let's revisit this in a few years and see how it changes. So let's talk about grape varieties. Now, Oregon is Pinot Noir, but there's so much more to it that you talked about. We've done the west to east, and we know it's getting drier and hotter as we go to the east. But also, as we go to the south, it's getting much hotter and warmer again, to the point that you can find your Bordeaux varieties and Cabernet Sauvignon down in the south of Oregon as well,
for
right?
sure. And there's a really well-known producer, well-known for Oregon, and I think you can find them in the UK, called AVA that planted the first Tempranillo in the state, and their Tempranillo is great. So yes, you can definitely ripen Bordeaux varieties, Spanish varieties in Southern Oregon.
Okay.
Willamette Valley is very Pinot. We have a higher percentage of Pinot in Willamette Valley than Burgundy does for Burgundy.
What?
Yeah, it's...
Wow. I suppose because of their Chardonnay. Their Chardonnay is much, much higher a percentage than your Chardonnay. That's crazy.
That is how it is. But Pinot specialists. And so when people say, oh, the Pinot from Willamette Valley is so great, I agree. The Pinot from Willamette Valley is so great. But the other part of that people don't talk about as much is we know how to do that. The winemakers here have been doing that. People were talking about it. They're exchanging ideas. Of course they can make good Pinot. They have experience and they're pulling on everybody's ideas. Where other varieties are starting to come in, you kind of have to give some wiggle room to the fact that they're not always going to be the greatest to begin with. And I think people are unforgiving of that because they're like, oh, but the Pinot is so great. Why would you drink, let's say, Gamay? Because that's getting more popular. But why would you drink the Gamay? Because it's only all right. And you're like, well, the Gamay is only all right. And this was a while back, but it was only all right because people didn't really know how to make it. So they were figuring it out. And so you have to give people the leeway to do that. And what we know how to do in the Willamette Valley is Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, and then I would say that there's more things being experimented with.
Well, let's talk about Pinot Gris, because I do love a Pinot Gris. And interestingly enough, I was drinking some Pinot Grigio from Alto Adige in the northern part of Italy recently and just realized, like, oh my God, that I don't drink Pinot Grigio from Alto Adige, and just the purity and the mineral expression and the brightness of fruit that I got from Alto Adige, I was like, oh my God, like I really need to explore the grape variety there. I saw that you did a recent Mission blind tasting article on this grape variety. And when everyone listening, Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio, same grape. But can you share some of your findings? Like, what should someone expect from Pinot Gris, which is generally what you guys call it in Willamette Valley, compared to, I guess, the famous Pinot Gris from Alsace and beyond?
Okay, so first thing, Mission Blind Tasting is a series that I was doing to study for the MW program, and I will bring it back, but I took my exam in June and I'm taking brief hiatus. And it goes into how to blind taste different varieties from different parts of the world that make what's considered a classic expression. But what that means is you're shoving everything into boxes and you're like, this is what this tastes like from this area. And that's not always the extent of what that region makes. It might not even be the best expression that region makes that's being pushed forward as the classic version. So for Oregon, and we can label Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio, I find that the reason that people label one way or the other is because they think that they make a more Alsatian expression or a more Italian expression. And both are made. So I think on the light, bright, mineral, probably more fruity, more peachy than an Italian. Not always. There's variability, but generally a little bit more fruity. But that expression with a little bit lower alcohol, there are examples like Ponzi, Elk Cove, and Sokol Blosser. I would say those are classic and what people think of Oregon Pinot Gris.
Okay.
I will also say that I like the other style of Oregon Pinot Gris better, which is a bit higher alcohol, more texture. Maybe people are putting skin contact on it. Maybe there's more neutral oak or even a tiny bit of new oak, mostly neutral. And that wouldn't be considered to be as classic. But Ridgecrest was making old vine Pinot Gris. And it was so good. It was like 14% alcohol, but just so textured and rich and flavorful. And the length on that was beautiful. They made their last vintage in 2024. So if you want that, you should get it now.
Okay.
They're now selling that fruit. The Eyrie has made Pinot Gris for ages. That was one of the first grape varieties they planted. And that is still one of those textured, kind of more golden in color, leesier, richer expressions. And then there's another producer I love named Antiquum Farm. And their farming is crazy. But the way that they make their Pinot Gris is also with quite a bit of skin contact. So it's golden. And then he will put some new oak on it. So the texture of that is just pretty insane. I love that Pinot Gris. I would age that one for quite a while where I wouldn't age the lighter expressions.
Yeah. And I think, this is the interesting thing, trying to decide what's what from what region. Like if you're blind tasting, Pinot Gris is actually a great grape variety to leave on the skins. It has got a grey pink skin. A lot of people are making it into orange wine. And when you do leave it, I remember actually getting a blind tasting for fun during my mock tastings for diploma, and I had no idea what it was. It just, because the concentration and the aromatics have been so pumped up, but then it's so much more savoury, and it just, I don't remember how many people got it right or wrong. It was so many years ago. But Pinot Grigio, it is not just a little green apple lemon sipper. But would you still say that, so you've given a spectrum, quite clearly Oregon, my God, it's a region of spectrum. Alsace does tend to be your rounder, peachier, even more smoked versions. And if you're kind of saying Northern Italy and not Alto Adige, I'm saying more, I find that the Veneto region, Friuli, Venezia Giulia is the more kind of classic, clean, fresh, more, that was say neutral. Help me with some terminology.
It is in that there's no oak,
light,
you don't have that tertiary character, and it's lighter and fresher and brighter, and the texture is leaner. Whereas like the viscosity of some of the Alsatian wines and the alcohol, you're like, woo, you get one glass and then you're like, all right, that's a winter white for some of those Grand Cru Alsace wines.
That is so true. That is true. Well, anyway, if anybody who thinks you don't like Pinot Grigio or Pinot Gris, I think this is just a wonderful moment to remind people, again, maybe you just have not found the right one, because quite clearly there is a lot to explore. Okay. Do you think there is any area, you've mentioned quite a few producers, so thank you for that. Again, I'll put that in the show notes. But do you think is there an area? Dare I ask, an AVA? But is there an AVA or an area that is performing really well for Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio? People are kind of highlighting it or not?
I don't think so. I think what matters more is the vine age.
Okay.
Because if you have old vines and you have lower production, you're just getting so much more concentration to that fruit. And so you're looking for producers who are either they have old vines or they purchase old vine fruit. Eyrie, Bethel Heights took out their Pinot Gris. It was so good. Now they're focusing more on Chardonnay. But people who have old vines or people who are a bit more south. So Antiquum Farm is it's down by Corvallis. There's a little bit more heat there. Not that much, but that helps.
Okay. Everyone. Anyway, there you go. Explore. What about Method, Oregon?
So new.
Yeah, okay. Talk to me.
So new. Like, opening festival is next weekend, and I'm going, and that's their like big launch event. So this is a brand new organization. But Oregon has decided, like South Africa did for Cap Classique, and Cremant has regulations, and Franciacorta has regulations, and Oregon has decided that they want their own brand for traditional method. So they said it's going to be Method Oregon. It has to be 100% Oregon, like Oregon made, Oregon fruit. It has to be traditional method. It has to be sustainable farming. And that can be like live certified, which the bar is not nearly as high as something like organics. It could be organic. It has to have an AVA and a disgorgement date on it. And those are your requirements. Whether or not it will become to know, like people will come to know it for super great quality or not, remains to be seen. But Oregon has we don't have tank method sparklings because we don't have tanks that would allow for tank method sparkling. Those are expensive. We don't have autoclaves here. We have people who are making still wine and turning it into sparkling. So it's a bit of a process, I think, that people are starting to get good at, where they're learning how to grow grapes for sparkling. And then a lot of bottle fermented traditional method. We have a company, Radiant Sparkling Wine Service. They will take people's still wine their still base wine that they've made to turn into sparkling and bottle it with yeast and sugar to undergo secondary fermentation. And they'll carry out all of the riddling, and then they'll return it as finished sparkling wine. So you make the base wine, and then they bring back sparkling wine. And perhaps they store it on your property. I don't really know how that works. But there's also, they'll provide kind of a protocol to go through if you've never done it before. And I think for a minute that was making a lot of Oregon sparkling wine taste very similar, which could be seen as a great thing because then consumers have consistency. But it could also be seen as not a great thing because then you have less variation and people like to have things taste different ways. So I think we've finally gotten to the point where people are starting to have their own distinct styles for traditional method sparkling.
Interesting.
And then we also have people doing crazy things like force carbing still wine.
So say again?
They'll force carbonate the still wine to make it sparkling. And that's
like
not
that's
not for the greatest wines, but it is for like some of the more affordable wines will be force carbed. It's a small percentage.
Is there a winery in Oregon that is kind of probably the leader at the moment for traditional method sparkling?
I would say that Argyle has the longest history.
Mm-hmm.
They've been making sparkling for a long time. Soder has a really long history, but Tony Soder came up from Napa Valley and started Soder Winery, and those sparkling wines are great. It was a fluke. They had a really cool year, and he said, oh God, what am I going to do with all this fruit that's not really ripe? And his wife went, I want you to make sparkling. So he did, and then they became pretty well known for it. I love those wines. There's also, I would say, newer in the space is Corollary, and they just acquired a vineyard that they're planting specifically to be all for sparkling.
Interesting.
That's kind of interesting. I think that's the first vineyard in Willamette Valley to plant their whole vineyard specifically for sparkling.
Okay, watch this space, everybody. Oh, right. Well, we'll return to that in a few years as well. I cannot record this episode with you without asking you a few questions about wine news, because you have been amazing this last year with your wine news in 5. Let's see if the series continues or not. But what you've done so far has been amazing. It's brilliant. Now, looking back across 2026, what do you think has been a few of the most important developments that maybe could shape the future of wine? What's been your most amazing takeaways from constantly checking the news?
Okay, so first off, Wine News in 5 was a podcast that was 5 minutes long, and it was all the wine news for the week. And then it turned into every 2 weeks while I was in my run up to MW. And then we have taken a hiatus, hopefully just for summer, might be starting back up in September. We'll see. But over the last 2 years, when I was running it every week, I would say most of it's pretty depressing.
Oh,
I'm sorry. The wine world isn't doing particularly well in terms of people drinking less. But I would also say this led me. There's been some really cool discoveries with like yeast that's capable of fermenting things to lower alcohol, or the EU in a questionable decision deciding that you can de-alcoholize wine and still label it as wine. That's to me more questionable, but showing that people do want more lower alc or non-alc options. A huge swing to white and sparkling wines and away from red wines. More engagement with like environmental certifications. And in terms of the wine, like the wine in general not doing super well, I have an opinion on this that has come out of 2 years of just constantly looking at the news and researching things. And my opinion is people are saying, oh, it's because younger generations are drinking less, or, oh, it's because we have so much competition from, in the US, cannabis or spirits. And I think that that's not right. I think that if you look at data, it is much more like the problem is the thing that you are probably listening to this podcast on right now, which is your phone, or maybe it's your computer. But you have so many people who are spending so much time on their computer. And then we've had so much of a exodus from office spaces too. So people are spending so much time at home, and then you miss the like after work commute where you would have your coworkers around and you'd be like, hey, you want to go grab a glass of wine, or you want to go grab a beer? And so you don't have that part. And then people just aren't, you can look at data on socialization and it's fallen off a cliff. So my take for the wine industry is if you would like people to start drinking again, you don't say, we want you to start drinking again. You say, we want you to start getting together again.
This is so true. This is so true. I actually genuinely, you're not telling me something I didn't know, but you've put the two together and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
If you get a bunch of friends together, there's going to end up being wine. If it extends an experience, it is, to me, a huge quality of life booster. Is, yeah, I want to get to my workout class in the morning, but I will trade that 50% of the time for getting to stay at the table with my friends an extra hour or 2 hours. And people just they're not doing the get together for dinner and then having that run over. And sometimes when people do, they're like, oh, that impacted my workout the next day. And we're all into optimizing. And I'm like, what about optimizing mental health? Like, wine is a big part of my mental health because it'll get me into community gathering spaces and take more time there.
Here. Right. You know what? In support of this, let us finish on a high, a positive note, everyone. Get excited. Right. You've tasted so many wines for your articles that you're writing for Jancis Robinson, for studying for Master of Wine. So I want you to share a few of your favorite wines, maybe of this year or cheap, whatever, ever, ideal for a barbecue with friends. Out in the garden, sun shining, there's some good beats in the background, sausages grilling.
Oh, okay. So two different answers. One of them is I love Zinfandel. I'm a huge Zinfandel fan. But it might, if it's really hot out, you might want something a little bit lower alcohol. But if that doesn't bother you, love Bedrock Zinfandel, and then also love Once and Future, which is, so Morgan Twain Peterson is an MW. He has Bedrock with a partner. And then his dad used to make Ravenswood Zinfandel, but now makes Once and Future Zinfandel. Those are really fun. Frog's Leap Zinfandel is really fun.
Yes.
Joseph Swan Zinfandel, all great. But also, if it's hot out and you don't want higher alcohol wine, I would say there are some fun like glue wines that are coming out. I had one the other day, best box wine I have ever had from Rhyme Cellars in California. And it was called their Chili Rouge. And I think it's like Gruner, Vermentino, and Malbec blend.
Nice.
That was great.
Nice.
Or we were talking about chocolate before the podcast started. I love good chocolate. That's always fun. Red, white, or rosé.
We were saying, everyone, that we wanted to start pairing. Tell me, guys, maybe this will be a series. Let me know. Pairing wines with anything but food. And so I said to you, didn't I, Sam, what would you pair with hand holding?
Yes. And your answer was Frappato. And
yes.
I was chocolate,
Pink
rosé chocolate, because my partner and I spent a lot of time in our early days drinking chocolate because it's lower alcohol, and we wanted to spend more time drinking more wine together, extending the window we were hanging out. So that was what we were drinking. But also, the theme of our wine writing competition for JancesRobinson.com this year is wine paired with anything other than food. So you should read this.
Mm-hmm. I love this. Everybody, links in the show notes. Thank you. Sam, thank you for just taking us down a different route, actually thinking about wine regions slightly different, not just looking at the theory of grape soil winemaking. So
thank you
really,
for
really appreciate
asking
it.
Questions that I don't usually get asked and asking me about things other than Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is great. I have lots of producers I love. You can email me. I'm sam@jancesrobinson.com. But I'm so enthused by questions that are not about Pinot Noir too. So thank you.
Yay! And on that, I shall drink a Pinot Gris or other varietal with you in London when I see you next.
Yes. See you in September.
Until then. Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode. And if you have any thoughts or questions, you're going to find my email address in the show notes. And if you're looking for a wine presenter, a wine host for your next event, whether that's virtual or in real life, get in touch with me. That is what I do. Now, next week, we're going behind the scenes of a very mesmerizing wine competition. My guest is Emma Denny, who has just been crowned UK Sommelier of the Year 2026. I watched the live final and it was just gripping. So we're going to go behind the scenes. How do you prepare for something like this? Uncover some secrets from the wine list at Claridge's, the legendary 5-star hotel in the heart of Mayfair, and take you through every stage of the competition step by step. Now, to finish off today's episode, as always, with a wine quote, and this is from an American author and philosopher called Marty Rubin. And he said, "The first kiss and the first glass of wine are the best." If you are enjoying the podcast and getting something from these episodes, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and a rating on Spotify or wherever you are listening. And if you know a fellow wine lover who would enjoy the show, send it their way. It makes a huge difference and helps the podcast continue to grow. So thank you. And whatever you're tasting this week, you know the rules. Stay curious, keep exploring, and remember, there's always another bottle, another region, and another story waiting to be discovered. Until next week, wine friends, cheers to you.